Hello, everybody. Good morning. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm aware that there are still people joining the session, but we're going to get started. We don't want to take up too much of your time, so we are gonna get cracking. So thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to this Charity Times webinar in association with Xledger. For those of you who haven't met me before, I'm Lauren Weymouth. I'm the editor of Charity Times. And I'm going to be leading the session today, and I'm going to be on hand for any questions that you might have at the end of the session. I've received quite a few emails this morning about recording of this webinar. The session is going to be recorded, so it will be available to send to you after the session if for any reason you haven't quite caught something or you'd like to catch up at a further date. So just drop me an email, let me know, and we can get a copy of that over to you as soon as it's available. Sorry, I've not managed to get back to everybody about that this morning, but there is going to be a copy on hand. So many of you are going to be familiar with the format of our webinars. However, today's session is slightly different to some of the usual formats that we run, as we're going to be sharing a live case study with the Shropshire Wildlife Trust. So the idea of the session really is to provide an overview of what a finance transformation looks like in practice, how Shropshire Wildlife Trust implemented this with the help of Xledger, and some tips for success for you all for the future. So I'm going to be chatting with Sarah Zaharek, Head of Finance and Operations at the Shropshire Wildlife Trust, as well as Ivana Erskovic, Consultant at Xledger, to talk through some of their experiences, and they're going to be the opportunity for some questions at the end as well. So if you've got any questions during the session at all, please submit those using the Q&A tab that you should have on your screen, and then we'll come back to them at the end of the session. So before we start, I'd just like to introduce Ivana and Sarah in a bit more detail. So we've got Sarah, who is the Head of Finance and Operations at the Shropshire Wildlife Trust. So Sarah's early career was focused on project management for a variety of commercial organisations. She moved into the grassroots live music sector 25 years ago, which eventually led to her joining the charity sector as an Associate Director for a community arts charity based in Shropshire. Seeking a new challenge, Sarah joined Shropshire Wildlife Trust 3 years ago as their Head of Finance and Operations. Her initial objective here, among many, I'm sure, was to review the charity's structure and the current finance system with the aim to find a solution for a simple, timely, but accurate financial reporting within a very complex organisational structure. Much of that we're going to be hearing about today. So hello, Sarah, if you can give us a wave, and hello, lovely to be with us today. And we're also joined by Ivana, who is a consultant for Xledger. Ivana is a qualified accountant with over 12 years of finance and accountancy experience, working in a variety of different roles and industries. Ivana joined Xledger consulting team in November 2022, and she supports clients through their finance system implementations, offering insight and guidance, taking into account specific business requirements, desired outcomes, and future plans. So hello, Ivana, give us a wave. Thank you so much for joining us. Safe to say we're in very good hands today, and if you are in the process of implementing a finance transformation, or indeed considering this as a possible solution, hopefully this session today will be useful for you. So I guess as a place to start, it would be good to address those who might currently be looking at planning for a new finance system. So Ivana, I guess as a starting point here, what do you think some of the red flags are that finance teams should pay attention to, kind of red flags that say that their current system really might not be working for them any longer?
Yep. I think typically it kind of depends on like level of workarounds. How long does it take us to produce our standard reports? How difficult that is, and how prone to error our results are. That's kind of typically, I think that covers quite a lot of ground and the different issues that we see. And I can see Sarah nodding. I think you had some of those experiences as well when you first joined, Sarah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, when I joined, we've got 120 projects, all with a variety of different VAT rules, restricted, unrestricted, various different levels of funding agreements, and trying to manage that in the system that we were using. It just wasn't manageable, and we were having to move everything into Excel and do a lot of manual work, which, as you just said, is it's open to so many errors. And we actually did have an error that could have been quite disastrous. Luckily it wasn't, but I mean it flagged that we needed to fix our system, basically.
Mm. And so what do you think, when is the right time to start considering a change of system? How do charities identify that?
It's tricky, isn't it? For me, when I arrived at Shropshire Wildlife Trust, I was sort of presented with what we currently had and a kind of a remit to fix it is the best way. And I think at that point, I gave it the opportunity for 18 months of working with what we currently had to see if it actually did work. The time I was spending on even trying to just get the basic financial position just wasn't happening. I was spending hours on it, and I think I reached a point when I felt that for the finances of the organization, interestingly, it just wasn't financially viable for me to be doing that. It just didn't make any sense. We weren't getting any progress. We weren't being able to actually analyze anything and work out financially where we could go forward. We were just constantly working on what is that figure that day and the hours it would spend, and it just wasn't timely either. It was taking me a couple of weeks really to find where we were a month ago. And that's when I just said, we need to look at something new. This isn't working. And also, I think the world has evolved. None of our colleagues were using our accounting system. Everything was done very kind of manually, or either via spreadsheets or even the whole like a scrap of paper. I did move it along from that, might I add, to at least to a spreadsheet thing. But it was time to move us all along, really, and drag us kicking and screaming into the 21st century that would make their lives easier as well. So that they could get out there and actually deliver our charity objectives rather than drowning in unnecessary paperwork.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think I would just add to that, I guess, Sarah kind of described the kind of what leads you to change in the system. In terms of what's the right time, it's never a great time in a way. Like, it's always busy. There is always something that the finance team were busy with, be it year end, be the external audit, budgeting process. There's always going to be pressures from the BAU perspective that make it harder. But I think what we tend to see with our customers is at some point you need to just go for it when you realize that you're having, the process is not working. And I think is just one thing that I would also add from some of my experience is sometimes people try to make it easier, but using like a phased approach and kind of maybe just doing the new system for part of the organization or for part of the modules. I guess I would kind of caution people from that approach. I think that also brings quite a lot of complexity and potentially makes it harder from the project team, but also wider users to accept and to kind of like get on board with that change. So yeah, I think it is a process, and it definitely requires resource and commitment. But hopefully, as Sarah found, it gives you the benefits that you were hoping to achieve.
Yeah, it was worth it in the end.
Yeah, I think it's a case of short-term pain for long-term gain, isn't it?
Yeah.
As you say, there is never a right time to implement any kind of change. Charities are constantly firefighting something that I'm sure you know about, Sarah. There is constantly something else that needs dealing with, and it's either that there needs to be more funding. There's a pandemic. There are always things going on that need kind of immediate help. So I think you've just got to go for it, haven't you? And take the plunge.
And I have to admit that I'm sure we'll discuss this more in detail later, when we actually decided to take the plunge, I took it at completely the worst possible time. I had a staff member that looked at the system, panicked and said, no, this isn't for me. I'm nearing retirement. I don't want to know. I don't want to learn new ways. I'm out of here. So I was down a member of staff, spending that time recruiting a new member of staff, and also trying to still get my head around the fact that I was still relatively new to the organisation and understanding their needs. So I probably have got experience of how the worst way to do it, really. But it sort of almost proves, as you've said about it, there is never a right time, but it's worth it. So you've just got to take that plunge. The benefits far outweigh it.
So how do you involve the whole organization in that process?
It's tricky. So interesting. It was part of my interview process when I joined Shropshire Wildlife Trust was, how do you implement change? Well, there isn't for me, it was about communication. I was very open with all of my colleagues. I didn't just focus on my finance colleagues. I opened it up to everybody and said, and kind of had some consultation with people, what do you need to make your lives easier so you can be going out and doing what you want to be doing? So I really tried to take on board everyone's feedback in advance, and it kind of just a very soft approach. So they knew something was happening. And then I did give a full formal announcement of this is going to be going on. Treat finance department with kid gloves for the next few months. We're going to be under a lot here, but it's going to be worth it. And everyone was fairly positive. There's always going to be individuals who will not take it on board, who despise change. We were really fortunate. I think out of a workforce of 50 employees rather, I think I had 3 who really dug their heels in. And all I did was to spend extra time with them. And, you just got to reach that point when you go, look, the rest of the organization's come along for this journey. You're going to have to jump on board, really. And they did. But that was the key for me, was just openly talking about it, really flagging that we were going to go through massive change. There were going to be issues, there were going to be problems, just being very transparent, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's all you can do, isn't it? You can be transparent, communicate with people, work through any kind of potential problems. It's the same with any kind of change in any organization. That communication is just so important, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think trying to find out what their needs were as well and include them was a huge benefit, because I think a lot of organizations, your finance department does all the finance and everyone else generally stays well out of it, or if they do their own kind of processes and things with their multiple spreadsheets when they're managing projects. And what we wanted to do is really bring everyone along with us and involve them. So that was a technique I found really useful, and they'd never really been included in it before, so some of them actually found it quite exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun to be brought along for the journey.
Yeah, and I guess it also doesn't come as a surprise. That's kind of the downside of not communicating early. People feel like they are being excluded, and sometimes finance is doing something for themselves, and it doesn't feel like the organization will benefit from it. So as Sarah said, like that timely communication and involving people throughout the process definitely works really well. And one of the extra point I guess I wanted to add was around the running like sort of training sessions with the end users before go live. So giving them a chance to really play with the system and kind of see some of the benefits, and also give them a bit of confidence before they have to start using it for expenses or whatever. It gives them a chance to kind of see the system as well, and maybe see something that you've been telling them about, and that they can see it for themselves and hopefully get excited about it.
Yeah, that's exactly what we did. We actually, very early doors, I think we'd only been implementing a month. We showed, how the expense system worked in a staff meeting, and, that it's on an app, and, look how easy it is, and really showed it off. And that really caused a kind of a flutter of excitement amongst my kind of colleagues who were there going, this is going to be brilliant. I can sit in a car on the top of a hill and put in my mileage rather than forgetting about it and then trying to work out what I've been doing for the whole month when I want to claim my mileage. I can literally go, oh, I've journeyed here it is on my phone, depending on signal, obviously, good old Shropshire. But yes, I mean, it really got them on board just by showing them that little kind of gadget, I guess, really. It got them not to think it was a dull finance system, because I'm aware that finance people have a reputation for being dull. We're not. And so I tried to kind of get it a bit more, try and get in tune with a different way of thinking about it, really.
So showing people ahead of time kind of snapshots of what the new system might look like and how it might affect them on a daily basis in a good way. I guess that's probably quite key to kind of bringing people along early doors, So how did you sort of plan for the resource that you needed to implement a new system like that? There will be a lot of charities going, I have no idea how we would possibly manage that. We don't have enough people or whatever else. How do you plan for that?
It was a massive learning curve for us. I now know, and there's always going to be negativity around things like this. And this is probably where what we got wrong is we did not have enough resource. So I ended up taking up the majority of it on myself. I thought it was hugely important for me to take it on, you know, that I wanted to know what my team were doing. I wanted to be able to do what my team were doing so that I could support them on that journey, and they would have specific areas that they would specialize in, but I wanted to know all of it. And I personally made the decision, which I would not recommend to anyone, that for 6 months I was without annual leave and I was just focusing on this. That is who I am. That's how I work. I would never recommend that way of working. Looking back now, I think I would have proposed additional resource in my team from the day-to-day workings so that I could oversee the day-to-day stuff, but actually focus more on the implementation. I know of some trusts who have alternatively pulled in a project manager temporarily to do the implementation. I personally think that you're probably missing out on the full journey that way, and you're always going to be playing catch up in the system. For me, I wanted to be the ultimate super user in our organisation on this system. So for me, that's the key area. I felt I let myself down and the organisation down, was a lack of bodies to be the resource in providing that support, because it's not just the prep work in the lead up to implementation of cleaning all your data, it's then actually learning a brand new system from scratch, from the basics right up. And I also learned, feedback wise, was to really, I wish I'd lowered my expectations and made it real. And now and that's what I'm doing now. There are so many wonderful webinars that Xledger provides you with. There's so many things the system can do. It's superb, but I think you have to kind of make it manageable and go, right, what do I want to achieve in year one? What do I want the system to do in year one? Well, for me, it was, I want all my colleagues to be able to do purchase orders, sales orders, expenses. I want my team to be able to manage that. I want to be able to do the VAT returns, obviously, and I wanted a reporting function and the ability to do my SOFA. I'm now into year 2, and it's all about additional things now that I'm trying to fine tune really and learn and make the most of. And I'll have another set of objectives in year 3. So that's the other key thing, is really limit what you want to achieve. You're not going to be able to do it all. It's just, you can have a team of 100 and I don't think you'd be able to achieve it all. But so yeah. Simplify your objectives when you're doing it and get yourself some resource to support you, which I know in charity sector is going to cause concern because it comes down to finances again. You know, how do you pay for that? But it's that long-term financial return really, is that by you know, investing in this. And I think charity sector, sorry, I'm going on a soapbox moment, is that we let ourselves down sometimes because we focus on delivering our objectives and actually kind of ignore the back office element of what we're trying to achieve. And if we actually got that right and invested in it right, then that's going to make life easier in the future and allow us to do our objectives far superior and far better. So it's really making that decision. If you're going to take that plunge, you're going to have to invest in it and accepting it.
Yeah, it's something that we talk about quite a lot at Charity Times, about the kind of how undervalued finance systems are in charities, but actually how pivotal the role is in securing more funding further down the line. So, for example, if your finance system can very clearly help you to understand the value of the pound, for example, and how every pound is being spent and what that looks like, you can then communicate that with donors. So, you know, you've got a lot of charities that have on their website a very visible kind of demographics and infographics that show, you know, exactly how every pound is spent, how much, you know, the average donor can contribute towards the charity's impact. And I think just, you know, that the financial system that operates in the background is really pivotal to that, isn't it? So
yeah,
it's very, very important for the long-term goal, but it kind of goes unnoticed, you know.
Yeah.
As you say, it's seen as this boring function in the background.
We're not boring.
No.
And I think sorry, go on.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I think that the key is, as well as, you know, we are answerable to Charity Commission, and you know, we have our governance that we've got to adhere to, and why are we making it so complicated to be able to be transparent about how we are managing our funds? And I think that's having the right system in place enables that, and it becomes reputational then as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's super important on so many levels, really. Talk me through the kind of training process. What did that look like? Obviously, you've got lots of employees that would have needed to learn about a new system. How do you go about training people on that?
Again, we kept it fairly simple, and we've done a lot of follow-up sessions. So me and my team, we extracted very color by numbers, I always say, step by step, very simple screenshots of what you want them to achieve when they're trying to do a purchase order or an expense. And it was useful for us to create those manuals as well. I mean, we could have, said to Exeter, no, we demand you create these manuals for us. But I think from our point of view, we wanted that ownership. We work in a certain way, and that's the beauty of Ex-Ledger, is that you can adapt it to suit what your needs are. So I think it was that I felt it was really important that we created those manuals, those learning manuals. So we have them in Teams, they're accessible to everybody. And I did group sessions of no more than 6 people in each session. We fortunately got very large screens in our organisation, so it was all, group work. They brought laptops. We worked in demo. Demo for us was a huge important element to this that Ivana has touched on earlier, where they could go away and have a mess around in demo. And demo is brilliant because they can't really break it. I don't know anyone that's broken it so far. I've told them to give it a good go. But in the same token, it gets a live update from our live system every 2 weeks. So they can go in there, mess around, and then 2 weeks later, it's going to replicate what our system is. So I gave them all logins for the demo system, sent them on the way to go away and practice, come back to me of any issues they had. And then we did follow-up sessions 6 months later to feed back, because we were learning as well. So we started to learn additional shortcuts so we could feed through those shortcuts, and in the same token, listen to what their issues were. And that was important, was getting that feedback. And we've literally just done another refresher a couple of months ago. So we are doing them fairly regularly, and they are mandatory. And I think that's important, is people they have to attend these sessions. It's not if you fancy it, because you want to bring them along on the journey. So they were my key area first. And then what we've also been working on in kind of the end of year 1 and beginning of year 2 is the reporting function with managers and getting them to get their head around it. So that's we separated that and we managed that. Similar style, manuals available with step-by-step instructions, the small group sessions. And then I always had sections in my diary an afternoon every week that was available for additional support. Yeah,
that's great. Some top leadership advice, I think, there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Everyone needs a Sarah in their organization.
Too kind.
Ivana, talk me through the kind of the more technical side of things here. So what kind of advice do you have around testing a new system?
Yeah. I think my first and overall kind of point is do dedicate quite a lot of time to testing. It tends to be a daunting task to start, because in a way, as Sarah was saying, it's a new system. Kind of how do you go about making sure that you're testing the right thing, and how do you get comfortable that what you're achieving? So we'll provide our customers with a testing plan. But I think for me, the key advice would be for all the customers to really think of real life scenarios and use real data, because that's the only way you can really see trying to replicate your day to day. Can I do what I've just done in my BAU role? How would I do that here? And I think that's where testing phase is all about. It's checking that the configuration meets where you require it, but it's also about getting comfortable with the new system. And you have the support of the consultant, so that's your time to also ask questions and really understand how will this work in real life. So yeah, and I think as Sarah was saying, the other point is just keep playing in it, like go into the system and engage with it. It takes time, like any new system, it's a big change, as we've already been discussing. It will not be as straightforward as the system that you currently have, because you've been working on it for years. So it does take time to embed. And as I say, like testing phase is really the time to invest in the new system and kind of try to learn as much as you can, whilst recognizing what Sarah, I think, brilliantly explained, is, you know, in that first year, there's only so much you can achieve at go live. And I think that's kind of really important to recognize. You will feel a bit uncertain about tasks, and as you use the system, you'll find out better ways of doing it. But alongside that, obviously, you have access to the support team, so there is always someone who can help you answer questions. But yeah, testing phase, I would say, quite critical, especially for the project team, and getting that kind of ready for go live.
Yeah, I think it develops good habits as well, because even now, 18 months in, I still I test things. So when I sit there and go, well, I wonder if we can do this, before I even go to support now, I go for a play around in demo to see if I can get it to do what I want it to do. And interestingly, when you do eventually go to support going, no, I'm lost, I don't know what I'm doing, they'll go away and test this method. So they don't just go, this is how to do it, go here, or I've gone in and I've done this, this and this to fix it for you. They give you full ownership to make you go away and do it and learn from it. And I think that's an excellent element to it. You know, sometimes we're so spoon-fed, or someone does it for us, that actually we don't really know how our own systems sometimes work. Whereas this way, it can feel a little bit drawn out early doors. But the reality is now I'm in that process of trying to do my own problem solving in the system. And then, yeah, I always know I've got support as a backup who will then make me go away and test it anyway. So, yeah, because they're so mean.
That was a joke.
Yeah, that was a joke. They're lovely.
So how long typically would a process like this take from kind of the, you know, ideas stage through until going live? What does that timeline typically look like?
I mean, I guess it really depends. Sorry, like it really depends on the size of the customer and complexity of the solution they're trying to implement. Sarah, like, did you do kind of 4 months implementation?
Yeah, 4 months.
Yeah, that's our standard kind of project length is 4 months. So that's between the design phase, when we discuss kind of how the structures are going to work, or like processes, etc. Then doing the config, and like then training and testing. So that's kind of 4-month period.
Yeah. And I'd say you probably need about a month prior to that in your sort of your data cleansing, getting everything prepped, you know, making sure your structure is exactly how you want it to be, because they're all the things that once you've prepped all of that in advance, when you do go into implementation process, it's about how do you get them into the system. And, you know, that starts pretty much straight away. You know, you really do jump in the deep end with it, and it's quite a pace, but it's a good pace.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point to call out, Sarah. That I think 4 months is busy 4 months, and there is that's operating at a pace and being very clear what your core structure should look like, and having the data ready to be imported into the system. Xledger is configurable, so there is relatively less work that as a consultant I need to do, and that's kind of why 4 months can work. But yeah, it is still a lot of effort that goes into those 4 months, and we're constantly working through a lot of activity and some overlapping ones as well.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that as a timeline, to me, it doesn't sound too bad. I'm aware that obviously, you know, a lot of work goes into that particular period of time, but it's certainly, considering the impact that it has long term, it doesn't seem too bad. You know, initially I perhaps thought that you'd be talking kind of, you know, a year or two. So it's yeah,
I think like that's what I was saying, like in terms of like the way this Xledger works as a system, because we're not building it from scratch, quite a lot of stuff comes out of the box. Then therefore we're really, part of the project is really focused on making the system aligned with how the customer needs it to be in terms of the structures and their data, rather than, you know, doing the building that maybe some of the other systems is require.
Yeah. We kind of treated as well, like as soon as we went live in April, in my head mentally, I treated year 1 as kind of live implementation. So you had your initial getting the system built ready for you, and then you then had the actual live process, which it's a kind of a different implementation, but it's where you're actively using it and you're still learning. in that live time. So then you've got another 12 months of where you're actually using the system, what you're learning from it, what works for you, what doesn't work for you, what do you need to rebuild, is there any restructuring? The joy that I have is my CEO decided to have a restructure after year one, which was lovely. So I had to learn how to do a full restructure. He likes to keep me on my toes. So I got to do that at the end of year one. So again, you're still, I think there's implementation, but you're always learning as you go along as well.
Yeah.
So the reality is that the process is far longer. It's just that the pace changes over time, I guess.
Yeah. The 4 months we're referring to is strictly the implementation period. We cannot do like, it's actually, we call it kind of 4+3, and the 3 is the post go live support that we have as a period. So technically it is 7 months overall, but yeah.
And Sarah, how would you say that your reporting needs have changed over time?
Oh, they're wonderful now. Yes, it was such a nightmare when I arrived. It was awful. I'm a real spreadsheet geek, I think, as many finance people are. I absolutely love my spreadsheets, but it was at a point where I just didn't feel I could trust it, and I felt not confident in my reporting to our trust, where we were financially, what was our situation then. And it made me very nervous. And I readily admitted this to Ivana the other day when we were chatting about Xledger, that when we finally built the report that we needed that suited us as an organisation, I did have a slight cry. I think it was probably because it had been such an intense period of time. But to know that I can literally go in, my boss can go and say, right, where are we? And I can just go and press a button and it's there instantly. And if it doesn't look right, it's really easy for me to go through pathways to find out what's gone wrong, what's been coded wrong, what's been put in wrong. It's wonderful. There's not really much else I can say.
So it's made your job a lot easier.
Oh yeah, I mean it's changed my job. I everything is so automated and there, and even trying to where you can do, I feel I can double check stuff more now. I feel I can then have confidence in what I'm reporting on, because it's so easy to find where the errors are as well. And errors happen, it's part of life really, but it just means I can focus on catching those errors. I've also am now delegating the catching of errors down to our managers. So I'm not even doing the what are the errors. I leave it to the managers to make that decision. It's ownership of their own projects. Their numbers really, in essence, aren't anything to do with me. It's up to them to manage them and report them back to me. And the system allows that method to occur. And it allows me now the headspace to look at a bigger picture and make more strategic decisions and, in essence, become a financial analyst rather than an accountant as such, really.
Yeah. And did you have many conversations with other charity finance leaders kind of in the run up to implementation or during implementation, just to get a bit of advice from other people that have been through the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for me, fortunately, my CEO had already gone through it at another wildlife trust. So he already had the experience. In classic CEO style, he thought it was wonderful and really simple and easy. So it shows how much he was involved. He now knows how much it takes. And in the same token, I spoke to other trusts that had implemented Xledger so I could get their feedback. The reality is that your service provider is always going to provide you with the glorious golden picture. I think it is useful to know what can also go wrong and to have that preparation for it. So I did my research on that. I did research other systems to see what else was out there as well. I mean, previously I've used Sage, previously I've used Xero. They both have their benefits, they both have their cons. So I looked around the market to see what else was available and kind of reached that conclusion that Xledger was the answer for what we needed.
I guess that's it. It's a busy market. There are lots of companies out there that are able to provide solutions for you, but it's just about finding the right solution for you as an individual organization, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And doing your research there is key. So yeah, I mean, in hindsight, if you were to go through the process all over again, hopefully you won't have to do that, but what would you do differently, and what are those kind of key takeaways for people listening today?
We did a lot of preparation on our data. I would have liked to have done more. I think I was a little bit naive in some elements of it. I didn't really cover, me and my team didn't cover every element. So I'd very much, communicate with whoever your service provider is or Xledger and say, what is it you really, what does it look like? What is the format of each bit of data? And then you can then, so for example, I forgot to do some coding, create codes for certain things. So that then that's something you feel the pressure to then do that, and you're stuck with that kind of, aren't you, of what your coding setup is. So I wish I'd had more of an awareness of that in advance. And again, I think I touched on it. It's resource. We are, at the end of the day, we still have our day-to-day work to do. How are you going to cover that day-to-day work? Because this is going to take up, I think for me personally, there were 2 morning sessions of about 4 hours each week. That was training. And then there was also a variety of homework, shall we say, that I had to go away and prepare. And then we'd come back into the training sessions and upload. So the training sessions basically involve uploading all of your data to the system. Again, you're being dragged along on a journey or carried along the journey. But very useful for in the future if you ever have to do any rebuilding or anything like that. You're learning, it becomes your own. It's that full ownership. So I think, yeah, just making sure your staff resource can cope with it. And I think also just making sure you communicate to everybody, not just your own team in finance, but everybody in the organisation, and keeping them up to date on what's going on as well. So I think, yeah, those are the key areas: communication, preparation, and resource.
Yeah, I think there's some really good areas of advice there.
Yeah.
Ivana, in terms of, obviously, I'm sure you work with various different organizations in kind of implementing a process like this. Do you notice a difference between a charity's approach to implementing a new finance system in comparison to a corporate, for example? Obviously, generally charities are more risk averse by nature because, there's a lot of people that are relying upon charities to deliver a service. Do you notice a difference there between the approach?
Yeah, I mean, every organization is different, isn't it? And so it's kind of hard to generalize. But I think there's one maybe area that does crop up, and maybe that's like the kind of consciousness around the impact on end users and maybe their preferences. So I mean, Sarah earlier touched upon like expenses module in the app and how easy it is to claim mileage. I've also had a customer who was worried that using expenses and kind of using Google to set up where your destination was too complicated for some of their users. So I think it can sometimes come up in that way around how will the wider organization receive this change, and is it going to be an easy system to use, and people kind of can be sometimes get used to like how something has worked and worked for a long time. So like that kind of initial change, there was maybe potentially some resistance there, or quite a lot of I think planning around how do we help end users be happy with the solution we're bringing it across, and including trustees as well. I think there is that element that Sarah mentioned, just kind of having that governance that kind of needs to be satisfied in charity world, which is kind of less so maybe in some of the corporates.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to get sign off from so many more people. You need more people to be on board, don't you, in a charity generally?
Yeah.
And I think it's also the key is that we can end up with a lot of volunteers in our organisations when you work in charity sector, whereas commercial sector generally don't have volunteers. And trying to bring them along on a journey is another tricky area. I'll be honest, we have kind of set up an alternative solution to that. We still use Xledger at the end, but they don't kind of use part of the module quite yet, because we want to bring them along for the journey in a slower, softer approach. Having that expectation that a volunteer is going to have the equipment to be able to do what we need it to do. So we provide it in a different way, but it is on the radar that in 2 years' time, volunteers will also use the system if we need them to use it. Our trustees do. Our trustees use it for their expenses. I was adamant that they did. We did have some resistance, but they've come on board and they accept that actually, for the charity to move forward, they needed to be the kind of trailblazers as well, to support the colleagues and the employees to know that trustees are using it. Why aren't they using it?
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, it's just part of working for any organization now. You know, you constantly have to adopt new technologies all the time. You know, I find that I'm constantly having to download a new authentication app, for example, to
Yes.
log into various different things. And, you know, I've got one authentication app that I use for my day-to-day job, and then I've got another one that I use for my trustee job. And, you know, and you're trying to constantly get to grips with various different pieces of technology, but it is just life these days,
Yeah.
you know. So there's no point in being resistant to any of this change. You've just got to embrace it, because it's, you know, here whether we like it or not, you know.
Yeah. And we don't want to be left behind. You know, I
No.
think sometimes in charity sector, we, as I say, we get very focused on what we want to achieve, the passion and, you know, really being on the ground running and delivering. But we also sometimes maybe need to take a bit of knowledge away from the commercial sector and how they behave in some elements, and take on board some of those processes to make ourselves efficient.
Mm. Yeah, I think there are always things that can be learned from the commercial sector.
Yeah.
But vice versa, you know, they can also
Yeah.
learn a lot from charities, because charities are great. So
Yeah, exactly.
We've got quite a few questions that have come in, so I
Okay.
think I might field some of those to you, so that people can get advice if they need it, and then we can come back to anything else at the end. So some of the questions that we've got here, we've got a question around did the new system result in any headcount reduction through efficiencies and automation? I guess that could be for you, Sarah.
It didn't for us. We did have a finance department restructure. As I say, we lost a member of the team, but actually what he was doing was quite, dare I say, old-fashioned. So we were able to sort of restructure our department, but we still had the same number of members of staff, same FTE. So we're 1.8 on my support in finance. No, because there's always something that you never get round to, and what it actually has allowed us to do is to get more coverage over what we want to achieve. So we no longer really have that to-do list, then things don't get done. So yeah, it hasn't reduced our workforce, but it has enabled us to carry out more work.
Same person's also asked, were there or are there any other systems used by the trust which required interfacing with the new finance system?
We're now starting to progress on that. So we are looking at our EPOS system on our trading side. We have retail outlet and room hire business, conferencing business. So we're looking at an EPOS system that we can integrate into that, and we're working with Ex-Ledger, because obviously they are aware of who they can integrate with. We're also going to be doing some work around our CRM. Customer relationship management system, to try and again integrate our members and our donors into the system. Again, it's a work in progress in the future, little steps. And finally, we already have all our bank payments are automated. So we have that linked to our HSBC account, and we've got that on both sides now. So both our charity and our subsidiary, they're both in the same system, and that's all automated. And there's probably some other elements. Ex-Ledger recently released a list, asked us to share what systems we use, so that again they're working with us all to enable that integration in the future. So yeah, still there is the opportunities there.
Great. We've got a few questions here around, sorry, these are all directed at you, Sarah, but questions here around sort of choosing a new system. So firstly, what was your process for choosing a system, and also what's been the biggest added value that you found from moving to Ex-Ledger?
So first of all, it was about what was the most efficient reporting we wanted. We wanted that accuracy. I wanted to know that what was in that system was accurate, especially around restricted and unrestricted. And finally, I wanted a system that my colleagues could use. So a lot of finance systems out there, they're very restricted on your roles. So you can see everything and do everything, and no offense to my colleagues, but I don't want them wandering into areas of our system where they shouldn't be, and probably ruining my balance sheet. So we wanted to know that we could have restrictions in place, but they could do their jobs and use the system, because what I found was my colleagues had no idea what our accounts and finances were, because they weren't allowed access. So that was a very key factor for us as well, was a system that could allow my colleagues to actually get in there and use it. So they were part of my decision making.
We've got another question here about whether you had any external support for data cleansing.
No, we did it all ourselves. Possibly, yes, in the few, if I could think about it, we may have investigated that. Again, another lesson learned, but no, we did it. We kept it all in-house. Luckily, bizarrely, we changed systems before my time, about 5 years prior. So it already had a bit of a cleanse anyway. So I was quite fortunate in that element that it wasn't too bad when we cleaned it up. So no, we didn't. We did it ourselves.
Yeah. Oh, well done. Ivana, we've got a question here for you. So somebody said, our transformation relates more to improvements to an existing system, move users to web interface, re-emphasize good practice about attaching evidence for transactions, etc. Would you say that that type of transformation is subject to largely the same challenges?
Yeah, I mean, as we've already said, like any change process is kind of will have its own challenges, and we should be mindful of and plan for it. The specific scenario sounds like it might be slightly smaller scale, and there's some of the challenges around redesigning how structures work, and which I guess for me is quite a big part of the challenge when you're having a new general ledger system. But I think all the stuff that we've already said around the planning and resourcing, I think is really valid to consider. And I think Sarah's point around having some really good manuals and easy to follow guides for the users, because it sounds like we're also trying to change or improve some of the evidence that we're attaching to transactions. So having some good really training guides and clarity around what is required for what process, I think is the key there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got couple of people are asking just around ideas of costs for Xledger. I don't know what your advice would be there.
I think it would be get in touch, because the price depends on quite a few different factors. So I can't really even give like a ballpark figure. But we work with many charities, so like we do try to make it an affordable solution. So please get in touch, and one of my colleagues will be happy to organize a demo or have a conversation. Yeah,
that's great. Thanks, Ivana. We've got a couple more questions here before I will have to wrap up. They keep coming in thick and fast, which is great, but I'm aware that people will need to get off. So one of the other questions here is, has the new finance system for you, Sarah, is the implementation impacted on your budgeting and forecasting and your decision-making scenario modeling processes as well?
Definitely. So again, we were working down a route of dreadful spreadsheets. Like I mentioned at the start, we have 120 projects, and trying to do a 3-year budget, and we use the committed, likely and target in our budgeting process. We report against committed and likely. Trying to manage that through a spreadsheet system it was vile. And I do recall in my first year of literally sitting on a Sunday afternoon trying to link all the spreadsheets so I could see the overall budget result. I mean, it was horrendous. And if you had missed one formula, it messed everything up. We made the decision, it was an added extra, and this is the benefit of Xledger, is you don't take on every module, you get to pick and choose, and it's actually very reasonably priced when you take on another module. We've taken on distributed budgeting as a module, and it means that the managers now write their budgets in Xledger. So they've had a real kind of learning journey here, not only from the basics to reporting function and now budgeting. So they are currently right now squirreling away, I hope, because the deadline's next Friday, to write all their budgets. And again, I'm in the situation where I literally run a pivot table, and it gives me full control and visually, and I do dual screening where I go, what's happened? What are they proposing? So the accuracy on that is much improved. We were having a lot of variances where colleagues were putting in their income and expenditure in the wrong months. We've now got the heritage where they can physically see it, and it's about getting it accurate in there. And we haven't done reforecasting yet. Again, it's about just keeping it simple. The aim is in next year is I will look to do reforecasting every quarter. And the system, again, just makes it really, really simple to be able to just do those adjustments, create that reforecast, and then obviously then see what our projected outturn is going forward.
Yeah. As somebody else is asking about, you know, how limited is the pool who can raise an invoice? Is there a limit there?
I'm not aware of one. No, I mean, you
No.
can literally provide that role. So you can decide what your employees, which roles they are. So you've got a role like employee, so then they're all able to do expenses. You have a purchase order role, so they can all do purchase orders. You have project management role, which means they do authorization. You've got department manager, and you've got sales order role as well. So you allocate those roles to the individual, and they can then access that area and carry out what they need to do.
Perfect. Sounds good. My final question for you, Sarah, have you had a holiday since the implementation?
I have, yes. I did manage
Good.
one. I think it was in June last year, and I just literally lay in a very dark room. I didn't move for 5 days and drank a lot of wine.
Good. I'm glad. Yeah, we certainly wouldn't advocate for anybody to work solidly for 6 months without any annual leave, but yeah, well done. It sounds like it was a huge success. Ivana, for anybody that wants to contact you just with regards to anything to do with pricing processes, anything like that, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, we have the contact details on the website, but if that is a way of sharing this with the participants, we can do that after the webinar as well.
Yeah, perfect. That's fine. Yeah, what I can do is get an email sent round to everybody who's attended, just with some further contact details, website links, things like that. And if you've got any further questions for any of us, please do just drop me a line. And Sarah, if you're happy for me to pass any on, then I will do that.
Yeah, definitely.
But I thank you so much both for joining us today. These kind of case study sessions are extremely useful because obviously it's nice to hear from somebody who's been through the process and has, you know, has honest feedback about it. And it's naturally is very useful for everybody. So really appreciate your time. And but yeah, thank you. Hope to speak to you again soon.
Lovely. Thank you all very much.
Thank you everyone for joining, and have a lovely rest of the day.